Okay, second try at this video because I started rambling in the other one. I want to talk about retries on tests or failing tests. Under the old system, which is still in effect for higher level tests right now, where an evaluator comes in, an independent evaluator, unconnected with your club, comes in and evaluates your skaters for tests and decides whether they're at the standard to pass and go on to the next test or not. Um, the general messaging that coaches give is they want all their kids to pass their tests. But I know when I've worked with other coaches, and occasionally I'll question why they're putting this test in that's well below standard or this test in that's well below standard. I'm always given excuses, like some excuses like, well, they're older and they need to feel like they're progressing, so I need to put in tests whether they're passable or not, which is, to me, insane. It doesn't make any sense to me. I've also heard the skater's moving away, so I want her to take as many tests as she can before she moves away. The skater's quitting skating, so I need her to take as many tests as she can before she quits skating. Not pass tests, by the way, take tests. A lot of coaches, for some reason, think it's a positive thing when you take a lot of tests, even if a bunch of them fail, which I don't understand at all. The only tests that are worthwhile having taken are the tests that pass. Now that being said, so over the years I've run into a dozen different excuses coaches have as to why they lower their standards and put in tests that they consider lower quality. I suspect, although I've never been able to confirm it, that many coaches do not understand good quality over bad quality. I've run into this and it doesn't seem to have anything to do with experience. Some coaches have an eye for quality and some coaches don't. There are coaches who will argue with me that a coach that is clearly not passable, they believe is clearly passable. And anybody who's an expert in skating would look at that test and say, no, that's not good, that's not passable. And I've had people say the reverse. I've had people put in tests that are very, very good, and have other coaches say, well, that's a terrible test. And I don't understand if it's because they're taking sides or doing some sort of weird, team loyalty type thing, but there just doesn't seem to be a whole lot of objective expertise when it comes to when tests are ready and when tests are not ready and when tests should be passed and when tests shouldn't be passed. And I say that fully accepting, fully knowing that coaches are the largest group of experts in skating. So you'll get less knowledge of test standards with parents, executives, and such like that. But over the years I have put in I have about a 90% pass rate on tests over the years, over the 25 years I've been coaching. There are some years where it's well above 90, and I've had years, I know I had a couple of years in Labrador where it was in the low 80s due to I didn't have enough lesson time to give. Not that I couldn't get up to the technical expertise, the technical quality. I could do that no matter how many lessons I had. But if you give less lessons to someone and you're not able to run through the simulations and all the different things that could go wrong and prepare them for every contingency for test day, then you can end up with a lot more psychological breakdowns and poor quality execution on test day. And when I ran at a lesson time in Labrador, that's what was happening. It was almost all psychological problems. And occasionally a judge that would come in with weird standards that I didn't understand, because we got judges in Labrador from all over the country, from Eastern Canada, Eastern Ontario, Western Ontario, Central Ontario, various parts of Quebec, Nova Scotia, and Newfoundland. And we really didn't know from one test day to the next what kind of regional standard we were going to get at our test days. Which again, I thought was a help, because that meant you had to kind of prepare for the worst case scenario every single time. The only two times that I can think of offhand that I put in tests that I knew were not passable, that were not good and were likely not to pass. One was a timing issue. On dances, I will often put people in for not just timing either, also confidence and execution. I would often put dancers, people who are doing dance tests, in to solo a dance that they were off time on, because timing is very important in dance. You're not supposed to pass without timing, and you shouldn't be passing because your partner is dragging you through the timing on every test. You should have some semblance of timing on your own. So I can think of two kids I had over the years who argued with me and said repeatedly that he didn't need to know the timing to any dances. because he had gotten up to the dance he was on without understanding timing at all, without even being taught timing. He just used to follow his partner. And every time I did that dance, which was the 10 Fox, he would be off time, and I would say, you're off time. I can't put it in like that. And he would argue with me and argue with me and argue with me. Typical 13-year-old brat. And so I eventually said, okay, I'll put it in, but you're not going to pass. You are not going to pass. It's not like you're occasionally off time. You are always off time. You will not pass this dance off time. And at that point, he had to solo the 10 Fox, so he took it and failed it. And I believe he failed it, I can't remember if he failed it twice with me, or he failed it once with me and then went on to a new coach and failed it immediately with a new coach. Or whether he failed it 3 times, twice with me and once with a new coach. Anyway, he failed it that time anyway, the time that I put him in as a message to him to try to get the idea through. No, you need to learn timing. You cannot pass dances without timing. I also had a girl many years later, about a decade later, who she didn't like to solo dances, which is super weird because she was a competitive free skater. She didn't mind doing her solo alone. She didn't mind doing skills alone. But for some reason, she was scared to death of doing dances alone. So I would occasionally make her do dances. She didn't have great timing. She was on and off. And her execution of body positions was, it was off with me partnering. It was very uncomfortable to partner. But it was even more off when she was alone. So I tried to force her to solo dances to see if I could get the message into her head that you had to learn, to be able to dance your dances a little better alone. And the odd thing was, every time I put her in for a dance alone, she failed it. I think I did it 3 times. She failed all 3 times. And then I would partner, I would only make her do that once, and then I'd partner the next time, and she passed it every time when I partnered her. So it was a little bit, it might have been a little irritating to the mother, but, and it never did accomplish its goal. She never did really learn how to solo dances or how to skate the dances alone. So, the only other time I put in a dance that wouldn't pass is I had a girl in one of the clubs I was the head coach of, and the mother told me basically that my daughter's older, she wants to take tests. If you don't let her take these tests, she's going to quit skating. And I'm trying to remember who it is. I can't remember exactly who it is. I remember she was a little overweight. That doesn't really isolate it, though. I know which club it was. I'm not going to say. And I ended up putting her in for these 2 tests. These 2 or 3 tests she wanted me to let her take. And she basically threatened me. She said, if you don't let her take these, she's going to quit. So I let her take, I think, 3 tests. I think she passed 2 out of 3. Because, if they were totally not passable under any circumstance, I would not have put them in. But these were kind of, I would say below 50-50 chance. And she passed 2 out of the 3 or 1 out of the 3. I think she passed 2 out of 3. And right after test day, she quit skating. Even though I let her take the test that her mother. So I no longer listen to parental threats in that manner. If you're threatening to fire me or quit skating or whatever, and in order to make me do something I know is wrong, I'm going to stick with what I know is right rather than listen to parents. Anyway, that's the old system. My general experience with the old system is every time you put a kid in for a test they're not really ready for, and they go up and they fail it, they lose confidence, they lose belief in themselves, they lose some forwards momentum. Now, coaches tell me they put tests in that are bad in order to keep forward momentum, which again is very counterintuitive. Doesn't make any sense. You're going to get momentum by passing tests, not by taking tests and failing them. Plus, there's the cost. Many times a test can cost up to $100 when you're counting coaching fees, test fees, hospitality fees, travel fees, etc. Probably over $100 per test. So it seems to me somewhat ridiculous to put a test in that you don't think has a very good, very strong chance to pass. Now, onto the new test system. The new test system, I should probably put this in 2 videos, but I'm not going to. The new test system, I as the coach also evaluate the tests. So I'm teaching the kid. It has to be the coach that's teaching the kid. I teach the kid. I decide a test is ready. I put the test in to test. So theoretically, there should be no retried test, or at least very few retried tests. And I actually had one recently. I think I've had about 15 to 20 of the new tests go in, and 1 has failed. And the reason that one's failed, again, it was similar to the reasons I gave before. I had a skater that um, was off time on a dance, and it's not like she didn't hear the timing or the music, because she would occasionally get back on, and there were some difficult steps that she would get on time most of the time, and then other tests she would just go completely off. So it wasn't an inability to hear the music, it wasn't an inability to hear the beat, it wasn't an inability to execute the steps with the beat. It was just a consistency issue, a focus issue throughout the whole dance. And what I did is I warned the mother and the daughter, this is the problem. If she goes off time for, now the current rules are there's 16 steps, I think, in the Dutch waltz. If she's off time for more than 4 steps, you have to have 75% on time. So if she's on time for 12, she passes. If she's on time for 11 and goes off time on 5, she fails. Realistically, you shouldn't be off time on any of the steps, but there should be a little bit of like forgiveness embedded in the test, and there is. There's a lot of forgiveness embedded in them. So I basically told her, and we went through, after I told the mother and the daughter this situation, and I wanted her to take it because it was a really beautiful, great dance, lots of power, great technique, great stretching, great form for preliminary dance, a very good superior dance, but timing was not really consistent. I went through several, I think 3 or 4 practices in a row where I made her do a full pattern, full round of the dance, 2 patterns. And I got her to try to guess how many steps she thought were on time. She could never guess. But I would tell her then, you had 3 steps off time, you had 4 steps off time, you had 5 steps off time. This pattern you would have failed, this pattern you would have passed, this pattern you would have failed, this one would have passed. And out of the, I think, 8 patterns I made her do for me, I believe 6 or 7 of them passed, and only one or 2 of them failed. So I said, you know what? Everything else is so awesome. I'm going to put this in, and you just really have to focus and listen when you're doing it by yourself to be aware of the music. And it so happened there was a lot of distractions that day, and she was off on about half the steps, about 8 out of the 16 steps. So I had to fail it. I didn't really anticipate failing it. I didn't really expect to fail it, but I knew it was possible, and it happened. Now, a lot of coaches will ask me, well, why didn't you have the dance partnered? Why didn't you have the dance shadowed? Both of which would help her with the timing. And the main issue is I usually partner my own skaters, and it's a real problem to find someone else to take time out of their lessons, time out of their day to partner someone on their dance. And there was just no one available on the days when I wanted to do it. And shadowing, same thing. I would be the one who shadows it normally, and since I can't shadow, in fact, it's against the rules for me to shadow or partner and test. I have to get someone else who I know is reasonably capable to shadow or partner, and I just couldn't do that. The opportunity didn't present itself, so rather than wait a couple months, I thought, well, we'll try now, see what happens. By the way, she took 2 dances, both of which had the same problem. She failed one and passed the other. So it's not like she is not capable of doing the timing right. The only other issue, I had another couple tests that were kind of iffy. And they were iffy because one of them was, I believe, Star 2 free skate elements, where you have to do 4 jumps and 3 spins, and you're only allowed to fail 2 elements. And I had a kid doing it that the 4 jumps were not really a problem. 3 of them were very Goldie standard. One of them was a little off on the takeoff, and I warned her that she had to fix it. And she did occasionally, but occasionally didn't. But the 3 spins were all very weak. Any of the 3 spins could have failed. But again, I ran through the test 3 or 4 days before we actually tested, and the sit spin she passed, I think, all 3 days. Backspin she passed 2 out of 3, one day with a reskate, one day without, and camel spin she never passed. I prefer to have her be able to do the camel spin for 2 rotations, but how long are you going to? I had her pause on this test for probably 4 months because of the camel spin. I told her you can't take this until you can do a camel spin passably. But the test allows you to, or the solo allows you to do camel spin or sit spin, so it's not, it's a little bit debatable whether or not it's fair of me to have somebody wait 6, 9, 12 months to learn 1 spin when all their other elements are strong. And especially the thing that eventually tipped the balance was the fact that her jumps were becoming gold quality. You can't have a bunch of gold quality things and then stop someone because one thing is bronze quality. You can. I could have. But it gets into questionable whether I'm holding them back too much or not. And she ended up taking the test and did perform normally on the test day and passed the test really fairly easily. I think she needed one reskate, but she had, you know, an average skate and passed. So, you know, in the end, I think I did the right decision. Now, the problem I have now that I've passed her and gone on to Star 3 is we still don't have the camel spin. And a camel spin is something you need every level. So, you know, we essentially start with one element behind, further behind where it even should be. Anyway, so I don't know about the new test system, whether your pass rate should be 100% or not. I think there are extenuating circumstances. I think there are circumstances where a kid can perform badly, be upset, tired, hungry on test day and not perform well. And most importantly, I think as long as I warn my skaters up and parents up front, since parents are paying for it, and say, listen, this is the situation with the test. It's most likely going to pass, but the last 3 practices she failed the test 1 out of the 3 times. So there's maybe a 70% chance she's going to pass. I have no problem with that. And I had a lot of people when I failed this test say, well, why'd you put it in? Why'd you let her do it? I think failing a test can be a good learning experience. You know, if there's something, a message I'm trying to get across to the kid, the skater, and I try several skating days, several months in a row, and it's not getting through, maybe the best way to do that is to have them take a test and have me fail the test, to let them know how serious that issue is. Maybe not, and maybe in some cases it is, in some cases it isn't, and my judgment on that might not be 100% correct all the time. But, you know, there's a point where you have to try different things, or more extreme things, to try to get correction made if it's not being made. And I think putting a test in that is dependent on them correcting a mistake is one way to do that. As I said, I've only, out of the 15 tests I've had so far, I've only had 1 retry. Well, only one that was really even close to a retry. You get reskates on every test, and I think I've only had 3 out of the 15 that I've even had to do reskates on. Most of them I haven't had any reskates. So very strong test, very strong pass rate. I don't mind at all if 1 out of 10 fail retry, when I know in advance the circumstances under which the retry might take place, and I've explained why that retry might take place to the skater and the parent, and everybody's kind of on the same page and know what's happening. This is a very boring video. I don't think I've covered everything quite right, but good enough.